Before the skyline, before the subway, before any of it, there was a city being invented in real time, making decisions that would shape the most famous urban landscape on Earth. And here's the twist. Most of those decisions were chaotic, ruthless, and completely accidental. This is New York in the 1800s, not the polished version, the real one, where the streets were mapped before the city existed, where an entire black community was erased to build a park, and where a single canal rewired the entire country. Let's go back to the beginning. In 1800, New York City wasn't the center of anything. Population, about 60,000 people, smaller than Philadelphia, tiny compared to London. The entire city sat at the southern tip of Manhattan, a maze of crooked Dutch streets shaped by old cattle paths and property lines. But something was shifting beneath the surface. The port was exploding. Ships pouring in from Europe, the Caribbean, South America, all funneled into New York Harbor. The city had one of the deepest natural harbors on the East Coast, and the merchants running it knew something critical. If they could connect to the interior of the continent, they wouldn't just compete, they'd dominate. There was just one problem. The interior was basically unreachable. Now here's where things get interesting, and where most people completely lose the plot of New York's history. Before the mansions, before Central Park, before anything recognizable, in 1811, a group of commissioners sat down with a blank map and did something almost unbelievable. They drew a grid, 12 avenues, 155 streets, perfectly spaced blocks stretching across an island that was still mostly farmland, forests, hills, and swamps. They weren't planning for the city they had. They were planning for a city that didn't exist yet. And people at the time thought it was ridiculous. But here's the catch. Within 50 years, it looked like genius. Still, a grid alone doesn't build a city. New York needed fuel, and in 1825, it got it. The Erie Canal, 363 miles connecting the Hudson River to the Great Lakes. Suddenly, goods from the American interior could flow straight into New York without crossing mountains. Shipping costs dropped by up to 90%, almost overnight, and the impact explosive. Between 1820 and 1840, the population more than tripled. Goods flooded in. Banks multiplied. Warehouses crept further up Manhattan. New York didn't just become America's busiest port. It became one of the busiest in the world. And now, all those people needed somewhere to go. This is where things start to get messy. Immigrants arrived in waves: Irish, German, Italian, later Eastern European, Jewish. The city wasn't ready, not even close. They packed into lower Manhattan, especially one infamous area built around 5 intersecting streets, 5 points. By the 1830s and 40s, it had a reputation, and not a good one. Charles Dickens visited in 1842 and described it as a place where poverty and crime had reached extreme levels. Buildings were collapsing, streets flooded with waste, entire blocks controlled by gangs, the Dead Rabbits, the Bowery Boys. These weren't random street crews, they were organized forces. They controlled elections, ran protection rackets, fought full-scale battles in the streets. But here's the part most people miss. Even inside that chaos, life was happening. Communities formed, dance halls brought together Irish and African American performers, creating what would eventually become tap dance, churches, clubs, small businesses, people building something, even when everything around them was falling apart. And just a couple miles north, a completely different story was unfolding. In what would become the Upper West Side, there was a community called Seneca Village, mostly black residents, along with Irish and German families, property owners, families, people who had built stable lives in a city that rarely allowed them to. It is rare, and it lasted until 1857. The city used eminent domain to seize the land, clearing Seneca Village and surrounding communities to build Central Park. The official story called them squatters. The reality? Many had owned their land for decades. Homes demolished, churches destroyed, entire lives erased. So completely, in fact, that the village wasn't rediscovered until the 1990s. Central Park became a masterpiece of urban design. But what it cost was buried, and still the city kept moving. By the 1840s, New York had another problem: water. The population was growing faster than infrastructure could handle. Wells were contaminated. Disease outbreaks hit every summer. The city had patched things together for years. Now it had run out of time. So they built something massive, the Croton Aqueduct, 41 miles of tunnel bringing fresh water from upstate to Manhattan using nothing but gravity. No pumps, no engines, just engineering. When it opened in 1842, people celebrated like it was a festival. Fountains ran, clean water flowed for the first time, and almost immediately, death rates dropped. For the first time, the city proved it could solve a crisis at scale, and that changes everything. Now here's where the city starts to look familiar. Through the 1840s and 50s, buildings were mostly brick row houses, clean, symmetrical, practical. Walk through parts of Manhattan today, and you're seeing echoes of that era. But then, things shifted again. New materials, new ambition. Cast iron started replacing stone. Faster to build, cheaper, stronger. And then came a moment that quietly changed everything. The Hofwout Building, 1857. It wasn't just the architecture, it was what was inside. The first commercial passenger elevator built by Elisha Otis. And suddenly, height didn't matter. 5 floors up wasn't exhausting anymore. It wasn't inconvenient. It was accessible. And this is where it clicks. The city didn't just expand outward anymore. It could go up. Most people at the time didn't realize what that meant. But it meant the skyline had just been unlocked. By 1900, New York's population hit 3.4 million, from 60,000 to millions in a single century. The grid absorbed it. The canal enriched it. The aqueduct sustained it. The elevator transformed it. Everything we associate with New York today, the density, the energy, the clash of extremes, it all traces back to this moment, to a city that didn't know what it was yet, but built anyway. The skyscrapers didn't come first. The ambition did. And the craziest part? Most people walk through New York every single day and have no idea they're standing on top of all of this. The erased villages, the forgotten grid lines, the gravity-fed water was still running beneath their feet. Now you do. If this changed how you see New York, drop a comment. Tell me which part hit different. And if you haven't already, subscribe, because this is the kind of history that doesn't show up in textbooks.